you shoot me in a dream, you better wake up and apologize.
The Cinik Radio Podcast.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio Podcast. Here are your hosts, Cinik.
We live in great times because the internet has given the world a voice, but other than complaining, it seems like they have absolutely nothing to say.
Igrihe.
It's going to be a really good time.
And Ryan.
Batman vs. Superman is objectively better than Infinity War.
IG, did we just forget Kim?
You guys completely suck.
This is the greatest show of all time.
This is episode 120 of the Cinik Radio Podcast, and I'm your host, Cinik. And joining me, as always, my co-hosts, Igrihe, Ryan, and Kim. And on this week's show, we are discussing Season 2 of Mindhunter. And we may even hit up a little bit of geek news. So like, listen, subscribe, but more importantly, enjoy the show. After the era of free love in the 60s had come to pass, and the 70s brought us a much more evil and complex issue, disco. But also something far more sinister, murderers who kill repeatedly in compulsion, and as they begin to evolve, even with some flair. This week we are talking about, in my opinion, Netflix's most amazing original show to date, Mindhunter Season 2, which follows the FBI's behavioral science unit as they drift into the black hole, which is the mind of a serial killer. Ryan, with a story this deep, this dark, and terrifying, is it hard to even fathom that this is actually based off of real life events? These interviews happened.
It's not hard to believe because I think we're used to things that are so over the top, that in some ways it's kind of muted. I think what makes the show good or great is the interviews themselves, and the performances are really good, and the content, and that it's not as over the top and as crazy as you'd expect, but the kind of delivery is so good, and watching them pry and prod and poke with every ounce of their ability, like extract information, is really interesting. So I really enjoy the process, because unlike most shows like this, it's not really about them finding the killer. And yeah, obviously there was that kind of thread throughout, but it's really about getting into the minds of the killers. And I think that's a lot different. I think in other movies and TV shows, it's done much more superficially, and they're much more straightforward in their thoughts and their actions. And so I think it was really interesting to see, really, again, watch them kind of extract this information and really get into the minds of the killers and the people kind of chasing them and trying to understand them. So it just is so different from anything that we've gotten, yet we're so used to this genre that it really is interesting to see a show take something we've seen a million times and really do something unique and different with it and take it to a new level.
It's funny you say that, Ryan, because it really is a different kind of show, because we usually see them kind of going after a killer or trying a killer, but we don't see what comes after. And that's them in confinement, kind of stewing on what they've done and then coming by and picking their brains and trying to learn why they did what they did. They don't normally do that. And I obviously have a lot of respect for law enforcement, but correction officers really do have balls of steel. Police catch these people, but COs live with them on a daily basis and are usually severely outnumbered. But could you bring yourself to sit in a room an arm's length away from an infamous killer like Manson or Kemper and sit down and have a conversation with them?
Honestly, I think, yeah, probably, because what are they going to do? I mean, they don't really have the ability to do too many things. And I'm sure before they bring me in that room that if I ask really nicely to those COs, they'll search them to within an inch of their life. So they're going to come in with basically nothing unless I give them something. And one of the things that seems to ring true about most of these guys, and the facts are there to support it, is that these guys want to talk to somebody about what they've done. And that's the thing about serial killers, is there's a compulsion, and a lot of times it's a sexual component, but they're proud of their work. They're proud of what they've done. So yeah, getting into a room with them shouldn't be all that much of a problem. I mean, I might still be very creeped out, because I was kind of creeped out even watching the performances. And I even went back and found some of the actual recordings of some of the actual killers, like Ed Kemper, and how close it was between the acting on Mindhunter and the actual Ed Kemper. And it's just eerie how close some of them are. So I just think it's really cool. But yeah, I could get into a room with that because they've already been caught. It's not like I'm finding the guy on the street and saying, hey, let's have a coffee and talk about your weird compulsion.
Well, we actually both have spent time with Ryan George and lived to tell about it, so anything's possible. But you're right, the guy that plays Ed Kemper on the show looks like him, sounds like him, and his mannerisms are very much like the killer himself. So they did a great job with casting some of these people. Kim, in the first season, it was kind of all fresh and new for our FBI agents, but by the second season, you could start to see the effects of this type of work. It just kind of wound down their lives. Is it possible to dance with the devil like Tetch and Ford do and remain unchanged?
I don't think so. I think one of the really interesting points of the story was watching somebody who works for the FBI and his spouse, Nancy, going through and seeing the effects of what a murder or what is the impact on their actual family. Instead of just it being, I'm sure we'll get into this later, but seeing that struggle and it directly impacts them and how it changes their lives and ultimately what ends up happening at the very end of the last episode, with Tench coming home and the house being completely vacant except for a couch and a bed. So, it wreaks havoc on your entire life. And it's, when you're in that kind of line of work, it's not just a position that you're fulfilling. It's not just a job to pay the bills. It's a lifelong commitment. And you're making sacrifices in order to have that.
Well, not only that, having to insulate your significant other from what you do to protect them. Like when your husband comes home, he can talk about his day freely and tell you everything that's going on and keep you in the loop. When Tench and Ford come home, they really can't say anything other than I'm working on a case or, point to the paper and say, yeah, this is what I'm up to right now. But you can't get into details, and nor should you. It must be a heavy burden to bear because you get married so you can share that type of stuff. You fall in love and connect with somebody so you can share your life with them. And work is a third of your life. These guys, maybe even 50% of it. And you can't talk about anything that you do. Ryan, Holden Ford is a genius. In some ways, a Rain Man of killers. We find him this season in the beginning having panic attacks and even semi-committed at the beginning of the show. Definitely a loose cannon, but extremely good at their job. But is there such a thing as being too committed to your job and too good at it?
I mean, there always is, I think, if you then allow your own kind of hubris to get ahead of logic or other evidence. A lot of this, there are a lot of other things going on around him. So yeah, he might be this genius at figuring out, profiling criminals, but he doesn't have the best bedside manner. He tends to rub people the wrong way. And in a world where there are politics and you are dealing with all these different people, he doesn't know how to play that game. And I think we see, especially in this season, that he can't just rely on being great at what he does. He also needs how to read the room and manage people and get people on his side. And he's not good at that. So I don't know if there's such a thing as being too good at your job, but there is such a thing as being, if all of your energy and efforts are focused on one aspect of your job and you neglect others, then you just, you may not be able to interact with the world in the way that you need to actually kind of maximize your own efforts.
Well, and you really saw that not being able to read the room when they went to that party with the assistant director leaving, and Ford had no idea that it was because of them. And the guy ended up just kind of yelling at him and storming out. Also, though, with his interactions with the other agents and bigwigs of the FBI, when Tench was telling a story, they're all laughing and glad-handing and high-fiving. And as soon as Ford started talking, they all just kind of started drifting away. IG, we all grew up with the insult, takes one to know one, or I know you are, but what am I? Could you understand the mind of a maniac like Ford does and not perhaps be one yourself?
I think there's got to be a little bit of maybe I am too in Ford, like to understand so intimately. There's no way that there isn't a little bit of that mindset in him. I'm almost waiting for season 3 when it is shown that like he's one of these people. He's Robert Ramirez or whatever, and is going to be the Zodiac killer or somebody, because it just doesn't make sense that he knows somebody that well and is able to read a psychopath as quickly and as easily as Ford does. And that's the thing about this is like Tench it doesn't fit Tench at all. He's such a straight-laced, almost 50s kind of cop. He's got the right haircut and the family, and he just doesn't understand all this stuff, but is going along with it because he sees where it's valuable. But Ford is just able to switch gears so quickly and talk about, oh yeah, that bitch deserved it, right? And get these guys talking about things because it's like he just knows what they're thinking as he sits there. And it's just eerie to think that he's got to have a little bit of it in him, but there's no way that he doesn't. There's just no way.
Well, his partner this season, or we can almost call him a babysitter, FBI agent Bill Tench, who's a seasoned agent and respected, is tasked with keeping Holden on point by Assistant Director Gunn, after, frankly, being responsible for the last assistant director's retirement. Kim, putting yourself in Tench's shoes, I mean, is there any way that you can keep this guy in check? And should you have to? As a grown adult, should you have to look after another adult, no matter how talented they are?
Well, I think more realistically, if you're a senior in any position, you're going to be tasked with supervisoral roles, and you're going to have subordinates underneath of you that you're going to have to try to keep in check. And obviously they think that there's something in Holden that is of use later down the road, or that he's going to play a much larger role. At least that's the way I took it. So I think it was just kind of part of the job. It's one of those things that he's, there's more structure, there's an end game, there's a goal that this new director has, publicity, fame, whatever. He wants a spotlight on him. But I think in order for him to achieve his goals, he needed to make sure that, the proverbial shit was rolling downhill, and to make sure that everyone was staying in line. And a good, manager is always going to delegate positions instead of trying to take them on themselves. So I think it was just, you're a senior agent, this is what I need you to do, and that's just how it is.
So you don't think that kind of went on beyond a supervisorial capacity to more of a parent or more of a father, where it's like, well, watch this guy at all times because, even though it's his job to interview these guys, he shouldn't be left alone.
I think they're a tight-knit group, and they built the process and the systems around, these 3 or 4 individuals that were just sitting down in a basement one day, and next it's, a big deal. I don't know if I would necessarily call it a fatherly role, but I feel like perhaps Tench was feeling a little bit of some neglect. He wasn't at home all the time. He wasn't taking care of his own son. Maybe he did feel some sort of obligation in order to, keep an eye on Holden. Who knows?
Well, it's kind of like a bit of a trope in media. Going back to probably think earlier, but like Sherlock Holmes, who needed Watson, or Monk needed his secretary, or House needed Wilson, or we tend to get these kind of crazy mad geniuses who have social issues, who kind of need a handler, but what they bring to the table is so valuable that it's worth that. It just might suck for you if you're the person that's got to babysit them, because you probably feel like there's more to do with your life and than babysitting this mad genius. But I think it's something we need, and that is necessary in a situation like that. And it's a bit of a trope that we do get, and maybe to me actually it's kind of like the weakest part of the show was the whole storyline of there being tension between them because he was a babysitter and Tench dealing with his own stuff. And so I kind of didn't buy into that or love that part. And maybe that's because that was the one part of the show that was actually more like what we typically see on TV.
Well, it's rough too when you tie your career to a rising star like Ford, because we saw it in the Thrawn books with Eli Vanto. It actually worked against him. Thrawn continued to rise, and Vanto got the brunt of it because they couldn't punish Thrawn. So you see it both ways. They could kind of make or break your career, but you're definitely standing on unsettled ground with somebody like that because you never know when they're going to go off the rails. Ryan, one of the more interesting and heartbreaking character arcs was the murder of a young child by a pack of slightly older boys, aided by Tench's son, Brian. Now, we saw that Bill and Brian had a strained relationship. They had a hard time interacting. Do you think that his son's involvement in that murder had something to do with Bill's line of work, almost like a cry for attention?
I didn't get that feeling watching it. I kind of got the feeling that he's like a budding, killer himself, and that he was more kind of a tool for Trench to for there to be a conflict within himself. That what if this is my son? Am I going to have to start profiling my son? And so I don't know. I got more the feeling of this being, like I said, again, just a tool to create anxiety and stress and kind of pathos within him. And I don't feel they really did much with the boy beyond him. Again, to me, it was just used kind of as a tool to explore him. We didn't really get much about the son, even though he was in a lot of it. And they deal with the aftermath. I don't feel like they really dealt with the son any further than how it would relate to the father.
IG, as a parent, we saw two very different reactions from the Tenches. Bill kind of dropped back and got into a let's deal with this mode, and his wife Nancy fell into a more defiant state of denial. How do you pick up the pieces after that, and how do you manage your child once they've been involved in a murder?
Quite honestly, even as a parent, I have no idea. Now, I know that, you still love your children. And regardless of what they do, you're there to support them. But I've told my children repeatedly, like, if you get in real trouble, please tell me, but expect that I'm not coming to get you. I'm not going to come and jail you out. I will say thank you for letting me know where you are, so I don't worry about, do you have food? Are you sleeping somewhere safe? And I know you're safe in jail. But I'm not coming to get you because I've told you your whole life, like, don't do these things. And sometimes I wonder about these shows because I'm like, do they ever talk to their children about, poking the cat with a razor blade is not the smartest idea. They seem to find that they have these kids that are doing just the weirdest stuff and nobody tells them to stop anywhere in the show. Or I'm not a big fan of corporal punishment, but I know that it has its place. I was spanked as a child and I think I'm normally well adjusted, but maybe I'm not. Maybe I'd be a much better person if it never happened. But the thing is I have yet to go out and kill somebody or torture animals or do any of this devious nonsense that Tench's kid is doing. And that's what I'm afraid of, is like, you have a parent that's ready to just disassociate and say, it was a one-time thing. It's not my kid. And the other one going, like, I do this on an everyday basis and that kid is psycho. I don't know. It would be a really, really strange road to cross as a parent. And I just cannot believe that, there's a right way or a wrong way to deal with it because, they may both be right and they may both be very wrong.
Well, and that was a tough time for Tench, too. Like, comes home at the end of the season, everything is gone. The wife is gone. Most of the furniture is gone. And back then, there was no such thing as family leave. If you took a break in your career to go deal with a family matter, depending on who you worked for, your career was over. So you might as well not come back. It was terrible timing as far as Bill's career, but it was also not being able to be there for his son and then his wife at the same time must have been awful for him. We've come across that because I have a coworker that I spoke with, and he only has one son. It took him forever to have that kid, and he's very protective of him. And I asked one day, just in bullshit talk, if your son ever committed a crime, would you turn him in? If he told you he committed the crime, would you take him down to the police station? And he said, absolutely not. So I said, if he murdered somebody, you wouldn't say anything. He said, no, I would bury the body for my child. So he's in for a fun time growing up. But on the other hand, IG said that he will willingly turn in his kids for reward money. So there's two different levels of parenting, and I sway more towards
Reese
IG's.
Cups. I don't even need money. Reese Cups.
Pay me in Reese Cups. We get a little more focus this season on Dr. Wendy Carter as she got kind of got out a little bit more and spread her wings and did a few interviews with some killers that went with so-so results and had a love interest that kind of fell flat on its face. She's brilliant, the doctor, but she has some major mountains to climb as far as the FBI. How do you think you overcome challenges as a female being in a male-dominated job? And do you believe that she's doing that?
I think that she's brilliant and very intellectual, but I think she does harbor a bit of some animosity. She is literally the only female, other than one woman that you see in a copy or area, pretty much during the entire season, working in this department, that is. And we're talking about the 70s, the early 80s, and we're coming out of, women just kind of found their place. You know, the bra burning's over, suffrage is over, and we're trying to pave our way in almost all male-dominated workplaces. And so to find herself in the position that she's in the office that she's in, is tough. To be somebody who is a lesbian on top of it, and this being a very controversial time, you know, I was watching a video on YouTube that was also discussing this. The whole AIDS epidemic hadn't even become a thing yet, you know, and so there's a lot of side struggles that are going on there. And do I feel like she's doing everything that she can? I think that she holds her own, and that's evident in the scene where there's a gentleman that keeps coming on to her and is relentless and will not leave her alone at the benefit. And she, you know, no. And she's, you know, consistent. She's persistent. She isn't taking any shit from a guy. That's for dang sure. And that's admirable for somebody, you know, a female in that era, to be able to hold that kind of self-respect and know what she wants and go after it.
Yeah, I agree with you. She had an interesting season of up and downs. Her relationship was kind of tumultuous at best. I liked seeing her get more involved, and I would have liked to see her do some more interviews, because she had a different and interesting way that she went about them, more so than Tension Ford. I think they weren't nearly as effective, but she was also the first or second time out doing it.
I think what was also really integral about her and Kay's relationship was that she wants to be carefree. She wants to be the go-getter. She wants to be free. And the woman that she ends up being with is the epitome of that. She is free. She saw an out. She had a husband. She had a kid. She had a life. She had everything going for her, but she wasn't happy. And she gave it all up to go bowling on a Sunday, you know? And that's kind of what she's missing from her own life, because she is dedicated to this job. And again, we're, I guess, kind of circling back to the sacrifices that individuals in any kind of law enforcement position are making in order to have these type of careers.
I agree with you totally. We had some great serial killers that we encountered during season 2. First of which that stuck out to me was the Son of Sam killer, David Berkowitz. Now, Ryan, even though it was a little before our time, as a New Yorker, I'm sure you're aware of the Son of Sam. What were your thoughts on the encounter with that infamous New Yorker, and were you surprised that he admitted to just making it all up?
I thought I knew not a lot about the case, but it is one of those that, especially when I was growing up, like everybody knew who the Son of Sam was, and it was it was kind of a little bit before our time, but it, you know, it's so kind of present in the conscience, I guess, that it was something that I grew up with. I had my dad's best friend's girlfriend. We were at a dinner once at her place, and a friend of hers was there and had mentioned that he literally like sat next to her and a baby or something, and because like it was like on a bench, and he just kind of sat there for a while, and she noticed, oh, he's interesting, decent looking guy, you know, seems harmless, and then he just up and left, and then a few days later, she found out that was the guy. So kind of crazy, but so just to say like that, something that was very present, and I thought he was great, and I think a good good job of and I didn't know that he kind of made it all up, but I knew the story about him hearing the voices and the dog telling him to do it and all that stuff, so kind of makes sense, and I love the kind of delivery, in a kind of matter of fact way that he kind of tells it. But yeah, no, I think it was something that kind of brought back some memories of hearing about this killer and how crazy of a time it was.
Well, being a New Yorker is tough. You can testify to that. And I would think that every New Yorker has a slight bit of Son of Sam in them, right? I mean, the heat, the overcrowding, the gridlock, everybody's about ready to shoot somebody. An interesting side note on David Berkowitz, they had a really hard time catching him. They had nothing. And one of the detectives I knew that was on the task force that actually brought him down, he got a parking ticket at one of his last crimes. And they went around and they looked at the cars to find it. And it just so happened that his gun was sticking out from the back of the driver's seat. And that's the only way they were able to catch him. It was sheer luck that the cops came at that time and he just didn't tuck his gun in enough. IG, they also encountered the big one. They were able to sit down and talk with the Babe Ruth of infamy, Charles Manson. Manson family member Tex Watson as well, who basically, the two of them just spent the time pointing fingers at each other. Which one did you believe? And what were your thoughts on Damien Herman's reenactment of Charles Manson, seeing we just saw him as a younger Manson in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Well, let me answer that first. I think his portrayal of Manson was pretty spot on. Like, I've seen some of the stuff with Manson that has happened in the last 20 years where they sometimes get someone to go in and sit down with him. And he's always just manic and crazy every time they go talk to him. But part of the thing is Manson himself really didn't do much. And the fact that they've got him locked up, and they should have him locked up, don't get me wrong, but the fact that they have him locked up almost doesn't make sense because he didn't really kill anybody. He had other people do it for him. And, you know, if we really have this whole belief in free will, then just because someone tells you to do something doesn't mean that you're responsible for it, right? If I tell you to go rob that Coke truck over there and bring me all the Coke it's got, and you go do it, does that make me responsible for the Coke? I don't think so. But somehow Manson got roped into all this, and that's great, you know, conspiracy and everything else. I guess it works. But even in this show, Manson trying to take responsibility and not take responsibility and do everything all at the same time is pure, unadulterated how Manson operated and how he's acted on other interviews since, where, you know, he basically talks one of the detectives out of his sunglasses and then tells the CO that he stole them while they were in there. So one thing happens that's the truth, and then he tells them a lie. And that's how it just consistently works with him. So I thought the portrayal was accurate. I thought it was great. And I still kind of laughed at why the behavioral science people wanted to go talk to him, because he's basically worthless in everything that they're doing.
Yeah, but he did talk 6 people into murdering a bunch of other people. So there is that. I mean, a mastermind of that level where he didn't need to get his hands dirty, but he drugged enough people up and sent them out to kill. I think that would definitely be worth the conversation.
Well, LSD's a hell of a drug. Agreed.
Ryan, did you think that Manson's kind of overall image took a hit throughout the course of that small little interview? He was a short little guy. He really, rather than take responsibility, like, yeah, I sent them out to kill. He's like, no, they had their own free will. I didn't really do anything, you know. They did what they wanted to do. Did you think it, and the thing with the sunglasses, did you think it made him look a little small and insignificant?
In a weird way, it did, which I guess is how it is. Maybe it did make him look kind of pathetic with the sunglasses and diminutive, and the whole even the whole before he's like that he kind of said don't stare. He's really small, and he just kind of seemed like this rambling, crazy kind of lunatic. Which is different from the because it's crazy how we in this weird way not idolize serial killers, but we definitely have as a society a really strange fascination with them, and he's kind of in that kind of pantheon of the quote great serial killers, and so it does kind of bring him down to size. I think that's a great point.
And it makes you wonder too, because there is this rock star aura around serial killers, why maybe some of these people pick up the gun. But the news cycle is so short anymore that if you go in and kill a bunch of people at Walmart, you're Manson for a day, but then after that we never hear about you again until the trial, especially if they kill you. I mean, then your fame or your infamy is come and gone, and you're lost with the next shooter. Kim, we got to see some interesting snapshots into the life of the infamous BTK killer. From creeping out his wife to stalking his next prey, this story of Mindhunter is set in the late 70s and early 80s, but he wasn't captured till 1992. Do you think this will be a running theme throughout the series? And are they lining him up to be some sort of main event case at the end of the show?
I do think so. And there were 2 individuals that were, they I guess he was the main one that created like his own symbol, and he reached out to the press because he wanted that fame. He wanted people to look at me, look what I'm doing. And you're right. Yeah. You get your 15 minutes of infamy and then we don't hear about you again. And for somebody who has a disease, a disorder of the mind, and they're narcissistic, they're sociopathic, they're dangerous, right? When that fame disappears, right, and the cameras go off and, you know, all the publicity starts to die down, they're looking for what the next, you know, shot of dopamine is in their brain, which is, you know, what is the next thing that I can do that's going to draw the attention back to me? It's typical. It happens all the time. And I was a kid when the BTK guy got arrested. I do remember some of it. I don't remember a lot of details. So after this, I sat down and started looking more up, you know, researching it. And I was like, wow, this guy was psychotic. Like, you know, it wasn't like a Manson type of thing where he convinced, it was just very persuasive and, you know, had a cult following. This was, I'm going to do everything. It's cold, it's calculated, and I'm going to fantasize about this for so long that I'm not even going to think about, oh, there could be obstacles that I didn't calculate into it. But who cares? I'm going to go through with it anyway. You know, like, it didn't matter to him. He was there to do the bidding himself, not pawn it off to another individual. And it was just, it's too big of a thing for it to not come back up later. You know what I mean?
What do you think, IG? What do you think they're trying to do with BTK? And do you think it'll be finished next season, or is it going to go beyond? And by the way, they're saying the next season, season 3 of Mindhunter, could be as far as 2 years away.
I think they're trying to set it up as an end game thing. I think that's really smart. You know, having a running theme, one thing that they continue to look for while they do everything else, is more true to form, and probably how this whole thing would have to come to power anyway. How the behavioral science unit would really be able to dig its teeth into stuff, because you're going to have things like this that are just going to confuse you. You're not going to know where it's going, and you're going to have to continue doing the work. And this was true of the BTK killer, that it took them a long time to finally catch up with him. And I think it was another one of those things, just like with Son of Sam, that it just basically ended up being pure luck that they got this guy. So I think it's really interesting, and I think it's really fun to set it up that way, and it keeps the show on a path. And that's one of the things that these shows either really get on and it works really well, or they get way off and it turns into CSI Miami, which is just formulaic, and I hate it because every show is the same as the last. And that's what I love about this so far, is it's really building one long story instead of doing little episodic things. And that's what I hope they keep doing, because it's really, really good.
Well, let's hope that they never have Holden and Tench put on their sunglasses like David Caruso and have that Who scream, and they say a little catchphrase and they cut to the theme. Ryan, we've spoken before about how all crime isn't treated equally, especially off air. And I personally had never heard the stories before the show. And understanding it was still the 80s, but could you believe how laissez-faire the city of Atlanta was about these murders, even though the city's leadership was African American?
They did a good job of it. I hadn't really heard about the Atlanta murder until about a year or two ago. There was a pretty good podcast. I highly recommend it if you haven't listened to it. I think it was called like the Atlanta. It might have been called the Atlanta Monster or something like that. That was about the murders, and even I think featured interviews with the murderer. You know. Himself, I forget, Wayne, whatever his name was. Yeah, I mean, I'm not shocked. It doesn't surprise me that it didn't receive a lot of attention. I think you look at we look at today, like, you know, what kinds of victims are going to, you know, garner national attention. I mean, we have, you know, people disappear and go missing and die all the time. And, you know, if they're poor and generally if they're minorities, they're going to get a lot less attention than if they're not. And so I'm not shocked that, you know, you had this prolific serial killer who killed a lot, who, you know, didn't get the attention or the kind of post, you know, arrest notoriety that a lot of these other serial killers have gotten. So yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me at all that I just recently learned about it, even though it seems like it was a pretty big deal.
IG, after months of stakeouts and playing cat and mouse with the murderer, they finally catch a break after they caught him literally dumping a body off a bridge. When they stop and question Wayne Willis, Like Holden, did you feel that this was their guy all along? Did he scream murder at you?
No, he didn't really scream murder at me, but he didn't scream not murderer at me either. There was just something off about him. But that being said, there's people I work with that scream something off about them, but I don't think they're all murderers. I just think there's something off about them. Yeah, and that's the thing is I think, I'm hoping that none of them turn up to be, keeping bodies in their basement and a head in the fridge or anything else. But it could happen because it's happened before. I mean, I live in a place where the neighboring state has some of the most infamous serial killers in Ed Gein and what the hell's the other guy's name? Jeffrey Dahmer. Right? They both come from Wisconsin, and I'm a firm believer in, all the cheese they eat, they're bound them up and turn them into killers. But that's a different story. Sometimes
Wasn't the case with Wayne reopened in 2019? Sorry.
I don't honestly know. It might have been.
No, I think they've since looked into maybe some of the other cases, or like they've tested DNA, using modern techniques, and everything that they've done recent has basically not eliminated him as a and makes it more and more likely that it was him with a lot of the other cases. But I don't think they ever kind of officially reopened anything to any of the cases as far as I know.
Well, I'm usually right there with the IG, but this guy screamed murderer at me the second they pulled him out of the car. I mean, number one, he was jumping something off a bridge, and the killer had been dumping things off the bridge, if not bodies and if not evidence. And two, he just couldn't keep his story straight, and he was really shifty. And he came across as somebody that was believed to be a lot more intelligent than he actually was. Like, he thought he was just very sly, and maybe I think he got away with it for as long as they did because the cops just simply didn't know who they were looking for. Right away, somebody that kills in packs must be a white person, and kind of Ford tore all that down and threw his own theory in. Kim, in the end, Wayne Willis is tried and convicted for only the 2 adults that he murdered, and the 27 youth that he killed go unanswered for. Your thoughts on that decision, the season, and your rating?
I feel like they left it open for the evidence being, discovered, during the discovery process of the case. When there's one of the final scenes where he sees the group of the paparazzi or whatnot outside the jail, and he's just sitting there staring at them, and right then and there that he's guilty as sin. The entire last episode of the series led up to the over glamorization of murderers and, like you said, America's fascination with them, even if it is in their 15 minutes of infamy. I think that it's going to play into how cases are probably populated in future episodes. And while you guys were talking, I did look it up. It was reopened on August 16th, it says. I don't know why I didn't get that far into the article, but that is interesting that they would, reopen it. And to have something so relevant, they filmed this last year. Who would have thought that, something like that would have, foreshadowed something this prolific. But I think the show was masterful. I think the camera shots themselves, the way they casted it, the way they tied in. The gentleman that originally interviewed Manson was the inspiration for Tench's character. They just really did a phenomenal job of putting this together, and it's not like some overplayed CSI show. It's not like anything like that. It's not like something that you've seen before. It's factual, and there's things that you can take away from it, and it's from a completely different perspective you haven't seen before. I actually loved it. Absolutely loved it. It's definitely, I went through and even rewatched a few episodes today. I'd give it a 10. This show is great.
This show kind of took a turn where I think initially, much like last season, it's exploring the minds of these different serial killers. And the first half of the season is really more focused on them interviewing these famous killers and getting into their minds, and while also dealing with their own kind of dramatic problems. And then it shifts towards the end to really focus on Wayne Williams and the Atlanta murders. And in a way, it becomes more like your standard mystery, but they're still, when they get to meeting him, they're exploring the mind of this kind of sociopath, and so I like that. I think the show does a good job of really showing how unfair that situation was to the people in the community and how hard that must have been for the parents who, it's like they don't really get justice. And then you have a community still to this day, many people don't believe he did it. And, I think there's a lot of clear evidence that it was him, and he was likely responsible for many of the, if not most, or if not all of the murders. But, goes to show that in that time, and they didn't have enough time to really explore a lot of it, but there's just the racial tensions and the anxiety and frustrations of a community. They did a pretty good job in the limited time they had to really showcase that, and through the parents, you really feel that. And so I think they did a great job of handling it, and, in leaving it open-ended, and in where a lot of shows try to tie things up in a neat little bow, this isn't. There's still some questions as to who the other people were, and it's not a happy ending, by any stretch. So, I really like the season. I forgot how good the show was and how good the writing is, and how good the acting is, and really not much to complain about. I think I'm forgetting the female agent's name now. Wendy, but I felt like she had a little bit of the short end of the stick, because like she's kind of stuck, on her own. She had her little side story, but I don't feel like it, I felt like you could see, again, that was another one of those areas of the show where you could see exactly where it was going. And the few times in the show where it kind of was kind of a cliche or did, fit those the tropes, and I kind of didn't feel necessary, and it felt like it was kind of tacked on because they didn't have anything for her to do, especially the back end of the season. I think she had some strong moments when she was interviewing killers. It was just so few and far between that I feel like she didn't get as much as she could have gotten in this show. But otherwise, I'll give it a 9. I think it was it's a great season, and I'm excited to see what they do next season. I kind of hope they continue to subvert expectations, and I kind of hope that the stuff with the BTK killer is just fluff for them to show, and that we never get that as a focus of the show.
These guys have basically said everything, so I'm going to say this. The show is amazingly acted. It's really well shot. It's historically pretty close to accurate. There's a lot of really good things going on here. And I, for one, am just a huge fan, and every time it's on, I really binge watch it. Usually never takes me more than 2 days to get through it because it is so interesting and so much fun to watch, and just it tears you in. And then I get done watching it and I almost feel like different, and sometimes almost bad as a person, because sometimes I almost feel like maybe I've had a thought like some of these serial killers, and am I going to go on some kind of murderous rampage? And then I talk to Cinik and I think, yes, I'm going on a murderous rampage.
More than likely.
So that being said, I really do love this show. It's a lot of fun to watch. And if you haven't watched it and you're interested in any kind of this stuff whatsoever, this is really going to drag you in better than anything that's been done anywhere near this in any time in the past. I mean, I've watched everything there is as far as serial killer movies because I think they're fun to watch. And this is beyond all of them. It's just so good. And so I could talk about everything that Kim and Ryan already said, but the fact remains that all you need to know is that this is probably one of the best original things Netflix has done to date. It's amazing. You should go watch it. I give it a 9.5.
What I'm about to say is a reflection of how I feel the citizens of the state of Georgia. I love you guys. I have a lot of friends down there. And life in prison is life in prison. It's like you can't execute a person more than once, and you can't bring these children back, no matter how many years you tag on to Wayne Williams' sentence. But their families, they get no closure. You can't let crimes like this go unpunished. Shame on the state of Georgia and shame on the city of Atlanta. But if we're being honest in this instance, this is probably only the tip of the iceberg if you look back on the state's history of disgusting systematic racism. This season of Mindhunter blew me away. It's complex, it's beautiful, it's heartbreaking, all rolled into one, and the acting is second to none. I love the main characters, I love the cast, and the killer interviews were fantastic and uncomfortable. We usually complain about the episode amount due to them dragging the story out to meet the 12 or 13 episodes. I think 9 or 10 episodes is a sweet spot, and other shows can probably learn from this. They left us wanting more. This is as well done as any movie or TV show gets. this is only season 2, but I have a feeling that this show will not only avoid jumping the shark, but will go down as probably my top 5 shows of all time. I give season 2 of Mindhunter a 9. All right, IG, let's do a little news.
Let's do it indeed. All right. So let's start a little bit lighthearted, a little bit fun. So we all know that we are merely a month and a half away, maybe a little closer to 2 months, but it's coming. Disney Plus is going to launch, and with it, The Mandalorian. And another reason just got revealed that I am just all in on this show, and that's that they added 2 new names to the people that are going to be on this show. In Game of Thrones star Natalia Tina and comedian Bill Burr. They're both going to be on The Mandalorian as well. And that just makes me want to watch it even more. Like, I'm there, guys.
You can't go wrong with Bill Burr cast in anything. And I never thought he was a tremendous actor, but I did love his spot roles in Breaking Bad. He really brought something to the table in those roles. So I'm excited to see what he'll do in the Star Wars universe. I want him to be just some angry speeder salesman just in the desert yelling about how hot it is and how the sand gets everywhere. What do you think, Ryan?
Well, it's funny. We were talking about how, before we recorded, we were talking about, his special and how funny it was and how, it definitely is at the line or crosses the line at times. And I was like, oh, well, look, he's Bill Burr. He can get away with whatever he wanted, not realizing he's got to deal with Disney. And now I'm completely rethinking that. And I'm wondering, what Disney's going to do about this or about the special, or if he's going to get cut out, if there's any blowback. So far, I haven't read anything online. Again, we haven't read any think pieces or anything about his special, but he better hope that nothing gets out. Otherwise, we're going to find out that whatever character he plays just happened to get left on the cutting room floor.
Kim, are you excited about the Mandalorian cast that's been announced so far?
I don't know why, but when you were saying that Bill Burr is going to be in it, the only thing I could think of was, like a short, balding, angry, ration-bearing guy in Tatooine. That's like the only thing that could popped into my head. But yes, I'm totally excited about this, and I've never been a Disney fan, but damn it, this is going to make me have to subscribe.
He's going to be a used land speeder dealer on Tatooine and just arguing about, the extended warranties he's trying to sell. So my next story just shows that Cinik and I get around and that our fake IDs are working, because in Batavia, New York, 2 men were arrested for stealing $75 worth of Reese's peanut butter cups. That's right. They went into the grocery store and sold $75 worth of them all at once. Now, the problem is that used to be a lot of candy, but the prices keep going up, which is why these guys needed to start stealing them.
Yeah, that's like 3 bags. $75 of peanut butter cups now is like 3 bags of peanut butter cups, especially if you get the big family kind. I'm right there with them. I don't think it could be a chargeable crime. I think that if anything, they should be rewarded because peanut butter cups are just that good.
No, I disagree. Peanut butter cups are terrible.
Bite your fork tongue.
No, I don't like peanut butter cups.
And I'd like to thank Ryan for being on the show since this will be his last appearance. It's been 100 episodes of fun. Ryan, go do some sit-ups.
So my next story comes from New Zealand, where they have in their society, when you're going to have a meeting with somebody that might be stressful, that you can bring someone with you for emotional support. And we live in a society here where everybody has an emotional support animal, be it, a dog, a cat, a horse, a peacock, whatever. We've seen some weird people trying to get on some airplanes with some strange animals. Well, a guy kind of got a hint in New Zealand that he was going to get fired. And he said, bring somebody for emotional support with you. So he went and hired, for $200, 200 well-spent dollars, an emotional support clown to bring to his meeting with his bosses. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. He brought a clown to lighten the mood as he knew he was going to get fired, and had him sit in the meeting with his boss and his boss's assistant while he got the axe. I think, ladies and gentlemen, this is my new hero, and if I ever get wind that this is going to happen, I'm hiring a clown.
Yeah, I love that story, and apparently his bosses took it well, and it kind of served its purpose. But I love the story. I love the pictures of the guy with his emotional support clown. And it's a great.
It just sounds hilarious.
There are pictures. It's great.
You to your bosses, but at the same time kind of making fun of just our culture and the fact that people do need something like that is just ridiculous. But I'm sure there are some people that would want some kind of emotional support for getting fired. And it's like, hey, you're getting fired. So I thought it was great.
An emotional support clown is probably better than an emotional support AR-15, which some people choose to bring when they get fired. So anything that prevents bloodshed, I'm all for, even if it's making a mockery of the process.
So my next story comes from the world of sports. The Miami Heat has a new arena, and bids are coming in for naming rights. And the one that we're all hoping is going to happen, or we're all hoping is not going to happen in the same thread, is Bang Brothers, the porn site, submitted a $10 million bid for naming rights on the arena. That's right. Bang Brothers, home of the Bang Bus. And if you don't know what that is, kudos to you, because I wish I didn't.
Well, they make interesting, fun, great videos that I've never, ever watched, and I never will. But at the same time, it would be hilarious if they won the naming rights to this. There's no way that the NBA will ever let this happen, but if they do, It would be the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, it would. It's too bad it's not a just straight up bid. Right, it's not a straight up bid. Like I think they have some say over it, but it should be, and they should kind of like when there was some scientific. I don't know why I'm going on this tangent, but there was a scientific like boat, and there was like bidding online or vote online, and they ended up naming it Bodie McBoatface. Like, it's like they should. I would love it if they named the Bang Bus or Bang Bros Arena. That would be awesome. But I'm sure even if they did allow them to win it, there would be some kind of some stipulation of the contract that there has to be approval by like the commissioners or the league or something. So as fun of a story as it is, it'll probably, even if they win, lead to nothing.
Kim, if they win, will the Miami Heat now become your favorite sports team?
No. Why? When here in Jacksonville, we have the Jumbo Shrimp.
Oh, yes. The Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp.
Woo.
The
Everyone get excited
oxymoron
now.
Of sports names.
God, it's so embarrassing.
So we were just speaking about the emotional support that people get, and apparently not too long ago, American Airlines passenger shocked other passengers on the plane when they brought their emotional support. Miniature horse for a flight on the plane. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we've moved on from cats, dogs, peacocks, birds, squirrels, things like that, to horses. We're now bringing horses and their uncontrollable pooping onto airplanes.
Ryan, I know you have something on this. I can see it in your face.
I don't get it. I want to be sensitive to people. I am sensitive to people with any kind of emotional or problems. And my issue is I know a lot of people who just got a therapist to like sign off on papers for them to have a quote emotional support dog so that they could just take the dog wherever they want, but they don't really need the dog. So I feel like it kind of does a disservice to people who legitimately need it, whether it's a working kind of service animal or just an emotional support animal. I think, I know more people than I should know that have kind of gone through that process just so that they can take the plane, the dog on the plane with them,
For no cost, even more.
For no cost, exactly. So like it's like, look, more power if he really needed that emotional support horse. Fine, if he really really needed it, but I don't know. I'm just cynical and skeptical that it was absolutely necessary. Hilarious, and I'd love to be. I mean, part of me would love to be. I love horses, and a miniature horse, great. But like, I don't know. I just have a hard time believing that, and it's just kind of crazy that you can bring like an emotional support chicken or an emotional. It's like maybe you got other things you got to deal with if you need to bring an emotional support chicken. And again, I don't want to diminish someone's experience, but I just. There are a lot of cases where I think it's not legit, and then it kind of makes it shitty for all the people who really do need that.
Literally on that flight, it probably got shitty for everybody. Listen, if you need your emotional support horse, throw a fucking saddle on that sumbitch and ride it to wherever you got to go.
But I have news for you. You can go on for under $100 online and get a letter from a doctor, all the certificates and everything you need to have an emotional support animal, which makes it bullshit. So I'm not buying into the whole emotional support animal. Like a working animal that has a specific task, great. But people are abusing the system, and it was created to be abused. It's really, really poorly done. So my next news story as if anybody cares about Desperate Housewives anymore, but a former star from that, Felicity Huffman, has been sentenced to 14 days in prison for trying to bribe someone to get her daughter's SAT scores to go up to go to college. Like it matters what college her kid goes to at this point. Like at this point, with everything that's happened with that, even if she could go to Harvard and got a degree from there, your name is attached to that. So, great, 14 days in jail, and she'll probably serve 2 and maybe a fine. And the fine is nothing to somebody like this because she's probably getting paid money from someone else now, and she'll get a book deal and everything else. What do you guys think?
I completely and totally agree. She's probably going to end up with a book deal for taking she had to rat out one of her friends or whatever in order to get the reduced sentence. I forgot. Here's how little I care. I didn't even read the whole article. I read like the first 2 lines and said, oh, for Christ's sake, I can't anymore. Like, this is retarded news.
You know what makes me happy about that, Kim? Is that the uncomfortable photos of her and William H. Macy going to and leaving from court. Because at one point, old Bill told her, this is a really bad fucking idea. And now he gets to tell her, I told you so, every single time they stroll in and out of court, because he has just the most uncomfortable look in his eye. Like, I can't believe I got to go through this shit. I told you not to do this. This is ridiculous. You're not even relevant anymore. And I love the fact that I'm actually surprised, being famous, that she got any jail time at all. But good old Lori Loughlin, I want to see what she ends up with, because she decided she didn't need to take the deal. So they shipped another boatload of charges on her, so she could be actually seeing some serious jail time. It'll be a full house for her.
This is one of those situations where I think I don't know how much jail time she deserves or doesn't deserve, but it just it just shows you kind of how unfair our justice system is. That somebody who there are other people who've done far less who will get far more. There are articles and memes going around about a woman who sent her son to a different school district to get him into a better school, who's getting a few years in jail. And, there are lots of situations where, and I mean, look, this is just the world we live in. But if, again, if you're poor or you're a minority, you're likely going to, face longer sentences for lesser crimes often. So I think it's more frustrating that aspect, that like, yeah, whatever, okay, she gets however many days in a fine and gets her name dragged through the mud. I don't know how much jail time she really deserves, but I do think we have a messed up system that will send somebody, again, for far less to jail for or send somebody guilty of far less to jail for far longer.
My thing is that when you take advantage of the system like that, you're generally taking away from somebody else, and there's somebody that got the grades and deserves to be in that spot, or is a good athlete, because that was one of the ways they were doing it, and deserves to be on the team, and they didn't get the opportunity because these rich pricks had to do this. And I mean, if you look at Lori Loughlin's child, she's actually a millionaire on her own. She has a successful YouTube and Instagram feed, and she didn't want her mom to do this to begin with. So you put these kids in positions where they don't belong to be, and they're not going to get the grades that you're paying for them to go get anyway. So it's really a mess. I'm glad they got caught. I'm sure that it's going on 1,000 other times around the country, but at least for now, this one stopped.
So my next story, much to Ryan George's chagrin, Movie Pass, the subscription service, is officially dead. 8 years old, all done. And as far as I'm concerned, like, how was this a sustainable business practice? Hey, give us $10 and go see a movie every day if you want to. Unless they were getting cuts off the popcorn, I don't know how they were making this work.
I think that the whole plan for them was they would become so big that they could force the hand of all the theater chains and basically say, all right, now look at how many people use MoviePass. You guys have to pay us, you guys have to give us a cut of the, of the concessions. And I think like AMC is like, no, fuck you, we'll do our own. And they did their own, and it's way better. And yeah, I'm paying double, but at the end of the day, the value is so much greater. And I think that they, again, they became a victim of their own success, and they couldn't deal with the kind of Fallout. And yeah, luckily, like I switched over to AMC in December when it was $20 a month. I'm gonna have a decision to make because I got an email today from AMC that my rate will go up to the normal rate, which I think is like 24, and it's only $4 more. But then like when does it go up to 30, and when does it go to 40, and then when but that's a whole other thing to deal with later. But AMC's thing is. Yeah, right. But AMC's thing is great and far better value than Movie Pass once they decided that, you could see like 3 movies a week and it was like the shittiest movies available.
Well, not only that, I think they expected it to kind of live and die off the gym method, that people that got the service and never went, and it worked in opposite. People went and they went a lot. And I wasn't quite sure how any of that worked, but the AMC pass is a wonderful thing. I have it. And even though, the price seems to want to fluctuate, there's still a lot of good perks that make it worthwhile. So if the people at MoviePass caused the AMC pass to happen, then I thank them for it, even though their business model was shit.
So a few more stories to go. My next one, we had a deluge of Lego movies. All started with the first one, the Lego movie. And then you had the Lego Ninjago movie. And then you got the Blocks movies. And then Lego Movie 2. And we're probably getting another 18 Lego movies. But to spin off of that, Warner Animation Group is going to bring us Funko Pop movies. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get a Funko movie from Warner Brothers. Don't get me wrong, I know that I've got a fair amount of Funko Pops. Cinik has probably 3,000 of them or something like that because he's a crazy person. But do we need a Funko Pop movie?
Wake me up when we get to the Bang Brothers Funko Pop movie. Then I'll go.
I mean, it's one of those things. I want to say I will not see that movie even if we have to cover it. But if it, I kind of probably said the same thing about the Lego movie, and at least the original was a phenomenal movie. So, but yeah, it's like a cash grab, and it's annoying, and like it feels like, okay, we already got the Lego movie, and we get all those IPs in their own movies. Am I really going to want to see any of this? Maybe it's like a Toy Story level, phenomenon. It's highly doubtful, and I hope we don't have to cover it.
We're covering it.
Yeah,
we're totally fucking
we're covering it now.
well, no, actually, no, because you don't even like animated movies.
When you say you don't want to cover it, that's keyword for Joe is like we're covering it.
Yeah. What'd you say about Reese's Peanut Butter Cups now? All right.
Yeah.
All right, so here's hoping 3's a charm, right? The first 2 of these sucked. Let's hope the third one is good. That's right. A new Mortal Kombat movie begins production. All right. I don't know if any of you guys remember the original 2 Mortal Kombat movies. Mortal Kombat back in the 90s was the most amazing video game of all time. It broke new barriers. It had fatalities and blood and gore, and everybody loved it. It basically carried all of the gaming systems through their first phases, but PlayStation 1, the Super NES, all of these things got new life from Mortal Kombat. So they spawned movies that were absolutely terrible. The only thing good about any of them was the first one had an okay soundtrack for about 2 songs. But terrible movies, badly acted, nothing redeeming about them like in any way. But we're getting a new one with some names attached to it. There's going to be some people like Jessica McNamee, Josh Lawson from Superstore, Chin Han from The Dark Knight. So we're going to get some people in this that might make it okay. And I'm hoping that it's finally going to be done right because I'm a big Mortal Kombat fan. I've even played up to not the current game, but the one before it. I'm hoping we can finally get a good Mortal Kombat movie.
Mortal Kombat 2 was totally my favorite, but you naming off these people that are going to be in this movie just makes me feel like it's going to be a jackass or a kick-ass movie. Like, not awesome, but the movie Kick-Ass. Like, kind of like a spoof almost. It's just so bad, it's kind of good, I'm really hoping it's better, though.
I'd take that over what we had the last time.
Yeah.
For what those movies were, I really didn't have a problem with them. I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination they were good movies, but I didn't think they were terrible. I mean, they were better than the Street Fighter movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
That was awful.
Oh, Jesus.
That was really goddamn bad. So
what a colossal mess.
Yeah, and you were right, IG. They actually did, the 2 Mortal Kombat movies have halfway decent soundtracks. What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, I am not going to add much new. I think I've zero bit of me is excited about the movie. I loved the game growing up. Yeah, the movies were of their time. Like, it was an era where we had lots of video game movies and they were all shitty. And I don't think we gotten a good video game movie. Probably, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. So, yeah, I'm not excited. I doubt I'm going to, again, it's like, unless it's great and we cover it, probably not going to go see it. But yeah, I'm kind of ambivalent.
So this is my last news story for the day. And this one hits near and dear to me personally because there's been a lot of news going around about the current administration in our American government going to crack down on vaping here in America because there have been, 4 or 6 people get sick and die or something. It's an epidemic is what they've been saying, which is great and all. So this latest news story I found said that vapors are now seeking relief from nicotine addiction in cigarettes. So you get away from the vaping. And the way that you do that is to go get some cigarettes, because now you can get your nicotine that way. And this is where, like, we had to talk about this, Cinik and I did, probably a week ago when the news first broke about the government going after vaping ban and everything. And I'm like, this is purely big tobacco saying we're losing too much money from vaping, so we need you to shut this down. But yeah, there's an actual guy named Lucas McLean who started smoking cigarettes in high school, switched to vaping after he heard e-cigarettes were a safer alternative, and then found out that people are getting sick from vaping, and so he switched back to cigarettes thinking that they're going to be easier to quit than vaping.
Yeah, when you said that initially, I was like, hey, that's a great theory, but I wonder if it just sounds like a conspiracy theory. But it's like, it's so, yeah, of course it's a tobacco lobby. They're massive. And it's like, it's just so ironic that, between gun deaths and deaths to cigarette, and, it's like, couple people die from vaping, and it's not even, and again, like, from what I understand, it's not like the main brands, not that I know anything about vaping, but it's not like the major brands, but it seems to be these kind of like counterfeit or bootleg, vape thingies for lack of better knowledge. Yeah. Well, yeah. So, but that's kind of like that's the supplement industry. And that's a kind of another issue, is that we probably should have a better system of regulating things like that, or bringing things to market and allowing for that. But it's just kind of ironic that the government, where there are real serious, the freaking climate is a major issue, and we're going to ban vaping, while we have actual real important things to deal with. It's just odd. And how we get this mass hysteria over things that kind of statistically, not that they're insignificant, but that, there are seemingly more important things and things that are more detrimental to our health and lifestyles. And that's what we're going to focus on.
Meanwhile, Colt 45 is completely legal.
Yeah, exactly.
Both the gun and the drink.
Yeah. My thing is, I think they should ban it across the board, but mostly because you can't look like a toughy rude boy with a plastic wang hanging out of your mouth that smells like Lucky Charms.
And that's it. You made it to the end of another episode of the Cinik Radio podcast. I'm Igrihe, here with Cinik, who you can find at CINIKRADIO.com. Also, we had Ryan, who you can find at thejimwits.com. And Kim, who you can find at kmcartworks.com. Great artists. Go check out some really cool stuff. We'll be back next week with some new stuff for you. Probably some news as well. Send your crazy news stories, any comments, questions, and concerns to us at CINIKRADIO@gmail.com. Find us on the internet at CINIKRADIO.com. Look for us on Facebook at Facebook.com/CINIKRADIO. Find us on Twitter at CINIKRADIO. And find us on Instagram at Cinik Radio. You can also head over to tpublic.com, search for Cinik, CINIK, and get your own Cinik Radio podcast gear. T-shirts, mugs, cups, stickers, all the cool Cinik Radio podcast stuff you could possibly want. It'd help the show, and we would greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for all the love and support. Keep listening, sharing it with your friends, like, listen, and subscribe. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CINIKRADIO.com. Available for download on iTunes.